Hello and welcome, friends, to another episode of Let's Talk UNRWA. We are so excited to have you here today with us. I'm Mara Cronenfeld. I'm the Executive Director of UNRWA USA, and I will be your host for this hour. As always, it's a great pleasure to be with you. A quick refresher on our program. Let's Talk UNRWA is a monthly speaker series live stream across our social media channels. Our goal is to provide all of you with an insider view of UNRWA's work, that is the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees. It's also a unique opportunity for you to hear directly from UNRWA staff, many of them who are refugees themselves. For today's episode, we will be discussing the current situation on the ground in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem. And like everyone listening in, we at UNRWA USA are gravely concerned about the escalating violence we've seen that's putting refugee lives at risk and resulting in several injuries and deaths across the West Bank. Today, we will be hearing directly from Dr. Adam Bouloukos, the new Director of UNRWA Affairs in the West Bank, to learn about the current situation on the ground and how this violence is impacting the lives of refugees. Dr. Bouloukos is a development and humanitarian professional with 30 years of professional experience in both headquarters and post-conflict humanitarian early recovery and development environments in Africa, the Middle East, as well as Asia. He has extensive knowledge of the international humanitarian and development system and how local solutions can play a critical and crucial role in solving challenges. We are so happy Dr. Bouloukos could be with us here today and really have so much to learn from him, particularly about the extremely challenging situation that Palestine refugees face today in the West Bank. Thank you, Adam, for your time and for being with us here today. And thank you so much for your service with UNRWA. So for our first question, you joined UNRWA's leadership in the occupied West Bank just 2 months ago, I understand. But you have, it's 3 months now. Okay.
6 weeks, Mara.
6 weeks?
Yes,
Less than 2 months. Okay.
Yes.
Wow, so you are brand new.
Brand new.
And that said, you have extensive experience managing UN humanitarian programs across a wide range of diverse settings, including Afghanistan, Ethiopia, Pakistan, and Uganda, and now Palestine, of course. You have also held leadership positions across multiple UN agencies, including UN Ops, UNDP, and the UN Office of Drugs and Crime. So maybe you're new to the job. Tell us how UNRWA is different from other UN agencies. Yeah. What makes this situation different and unique? We know you probably have a lot of stories there. And we look forward to hearing from you on these issues.
Thank you. Thank you much, Mara. Thank you so much, Mara, for inviting me. And thank you to UNRWA USA for organizing these talks. It's great as an American to also participate in this kind of conversation. I'm originally from upstate New York. Great state of New York. And to be in this assignment now, so many years after studying these issues as a university student. And as we were chatting earlier, Mara, I remember a class that I had at Bucknell University, my undergraduate university, with a professor named Richard Petterick, who had maps on the wall, and he had a map of Israel, Palestine, West Bank, Gaza. And I remember all the dotted lines that were on that map. And I thought, that's kind of curious. And, as a uninformed or less informed 19-year-old, I was very curious about that, and then thought one day maybe I'll end up there. And so here I am many, many years later, and very happy to be part of this UNRWA team. It's a fascinating organization, and we have so many genuine supporters across the globe, including UNRWA USA. I need to thank you for contributions that have been made. Some $2.7 million have been raised this year. We still have a couple months left in the year, Mara. So get on the horn and get your colleagues to contribute.
We will. From your mouth to God's ears. We have a lot of people listening today who I know support us and will continue to do so.
Very good, very good. No, I thank them for their contributions. And what makes UNRWA unique? Okay, so I've been in the United Nations for a very long time, 27 years, 12 countries. This is a unique environment. I feel in some ways all of these years have kind of prepared me for this, although in a lot of ways, nothing can prepare you for life in UNRWA. The scale of our operations are enormous. So at the big level of UNRWA, we serve some 5.7 million Palestine refugees. In this duty station, or field office, as we call it, in the West Bank, we have some 870,000 Palestine refugees. The work that we do is quasi-governmental. I mean, we're providing services on a daily basis. So different than humanitarian operations that I might have been in, where you have, I don't know, a natural disaster, like I was in Pakistan, where there was an earthquake and you're kind of responding very quickly. And then the government kind of takes over and handles some of the follow-on work there. Here, we are providing these services every day, primarily in education, health services, relief and social services, and some microfinance and a bit on infrastructure. So it really is like a government. And we're doing that not simply because the Palestinian government authorities are incapable. It's not about that. It's that there is a mandate given to UNRWA to be the provider of these services until there is a just and solution to the conflict. Now, what that looks like is beyond my mandate. It's beyond the mandate of UNRWA. This is a larger political issue to determine, what exactly a just and lasting solution to the conflict would be. In the absence of that, we're providing these services. So it's unlike anything I've seen, because the services are literally daily. And as you had mentioned, the increased insecurity and violence is extremely worrying to us and to me as a director, because my day starts very early with a barrage of messages and emails from our colleagues working in the field, from our security colleagues to say, okay, this road is closed, shot fired here, rocks thrown there. It's really constant. So, the difference for me, having, been in a lot of places that one would think would be difficult, Afghanistan, Sudan, the difference here is the sheer number of military incursions, for lack of a better word, of the Israelis. I came into the job knowing that my day would be filled with a lot of operational and logistic challenges. I was sort of thinking, okay, we're constantly negotiating on the movement of a vehicle through a checkpoint, and that checkpoint, that drive should take 15 minutes, but in fact it takes an hour because of those logistic challenges. That's only a piece of it. That's a small piece of it. The real challenge is the constant military engagement and really urban warfare. This is not just, people sort of scuffling in the streets. We've had something like 7,000 or nearly 7,000 military incursions this year.
Wow.
It's literally constant. And that means that our UNRWA services, and again, think kind of quasi-governmental, are impacted all the time. And we have something like 46,000 kids in school right now. And, imagine having to sort of close schools, open schools, not sure if they're going to be running, having them start late, and not the things that I remember as a child in the 70s in upstate New York, where school was closed if there was a snowstorm. That's what you hope would happen. It wasn't because of some military incursion. Now, I know, of course, there's the issues in the U.S. with regard to gun violence in school, and it's similar in that sense that these are traumatic events that traumatize children. And but here you have a very significant military operation from the part of the Israelis in different military actions that are often prompted by some action. They're not in a vacuum. There might have been a shot fired. There might have been some other violence. And they have these sort of search and arrest exercises that, if you think of that term, sounds like your local police officer knocking at your door and saying, okay, come on down to the station. But it's not that. It might be armored personnel carriers, rockets fired, and the collateral damage, particularly in refugee camps that we serve, the 19 refugee camps across the West Bank, is often significant. You've got densely populated areas. A rocket, doesn't discriminate, right? It'll go through a house and hit another house. So that's the context of the work. And the population that we're serving, the Palestine refugees, who are defined as, those who have been registered. They're registered with UNRWA as refugees, and those that had been forcibly moved, or during the 46 to 48 period, who lost lives, homes, livelihood. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for this introduction. And, as you're speaking, I'm reflecting on, I was just, looking at some of the headlines about what's happening in the West Bank, especially from, the headlines in the US. And they are just that, they're headlines. So they're really top level. They're talking about incursions. They're talking about weapons fired. But they're not talking about what life is like on the ground for these 870,000 Palestine refugees. And we know that a lot of these incursions are in camps themselves, which are highly densely populated.
Correct.
Maybe you can talk to us a little bit about just what that is like. Take us beyond the headlines and into the refugee camps, into the schools. You had mentioned, for example, being at a school during lockdown and how the students reacted. Tell us, what about trash pickup? What happens during these times when the camps are shut down?
Sure. Maybe I just back up a second, Mara, on this one. And it's important for the audience because my feeling is that the global narrative makes this seem that somehow you've got these two warring nations. You've got Palestine and Israel, and they're fighting every day like equals over a border or over some other kind of dispute, right? It is absolutely not the case, right? This is a really imbalanced relationship. Very important to understand that. Right?
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And then so many times the headlines speak about these two entities as if they were have the same elements of power, and it's not that.
Right. And so this is an area, the West Bank, with a population living under occupation. So occupation is different than simply poverty or political disagreements or fragmented government and all these other kinds of things that we might see in another conflict or another difficult working environment. And what this means is that every action and every engagement that an individual has with his or her community is regulated, right? The movements of those people, the kinds of jobs that they can have, their ability to repair their house, their access to water, their access to services is all impacted by the occupation, right? So something seemingly innocuous like olive picking, right, is a huge security issue here. And on Monday, it was UN Day, 24th of October, and we took 120 staff, 110 from UNRWA and 10 from other UN agencies, out to an olive grove to pick olives, to help a family. Getting to that particular location, Beit Iksa, which is 98% refugees, was so complicated in terms of the logistics of just getting there through the checkpoints and then getting down to the olives and helping them, collect the olives. There was a tractor behind us, an old farmer putting along on a beat up old tractor, going through a military checkpoint with the soldiers there with machine guns checking his ID for him to get to an olive grove that the family has had for generations, right? I mean, olives are a really important part of this culture here. And I did some research before that olive picking exercise. I'm Greek by descent. I should know more about olives, but so olives are the oldest fruit. God's oldest fruit, or something is labeled in an article I read, and they have been cultivated here, domesticated for 8,000 years. There's 8,000 years people have been growing olives in this part of the world. So it's really exciting to go there and kind of see what that was like. And again, what the occupation meant for something as simple as picking olives, and the insecurity that might be associated with that from the settlers, the illegal settlements that are in the West Bank, where settlers will come and try to disturb and disrupt the olive harvest. The school or the schooling issue, this really touches my heart. I mean, I'm a parent of 3 boys. And anybody that's a parent, I think, can relate. When there was a very significant military incursion in Jenin in the north of the West Bank, I had to, as a director, lock down schools. So we have 4 schools there, 1,700 students. Wow. Okay, 1,700 students in those 4 schools in Jenin. The 3 of the schools are kind of more or less next to one another, and they're just at the roundabout where all of the military vehicles come in. And the one that's really at the buffer to that, I mean, the one that's closest to the roundabout is the elementary girls' school. So I met with those students a couple of days after the event, where we locked them down for 3+ hours. They had no access to bathrooms. They had no water. They had no food. And I was talking with these young, a grade 1 class. I mean, these are 7-year-old girls. And they were so adorable. They were very proud of how they had behaved, and they followed the teacher's directions, and raising their hands of what they would do and how they responded. But it was just really horrible. And some of them are so visibly traumatized, right?
Yeah.
These kind of blank faces, living in this, and then wondering when it's going to happen again. Many of our students now, we started school in the early part of September, the 46,000 students that we have in school on any given day. And we've already lost 8-10 days of school in some locations. Wow. So we're trying to do sort of catch-up work and trying to see how we can better deliver, or how do we deliver the services in this potentially protracted new environment, where if things kind of go on for, if you miss school for a few days, you can kind of catch up. But if it becomes months, what does it look like for all of these students and for our medical services? And, we're constantly negotiating access with the Israelis for services. So it has the sort of trappings of a humanitarian environment, except that it's just next door from the West Bank, or that is a modern first world country with, people walking around with lattes and going to yoga classes. Right there. Literally, there's a wall. In this case, it's not a political, it's a literal concrete
physical wall.
And beyond that is then, is the modern Israeli environment, and then the West Bank on the other side, and these very, impoverished refugee camps and locations.
Wow. I can just picture those young girls in the school under lockdown. I have children myself, and you mentioned the violence in the U.S. That's many of the parents' worst fear, and just thinking about that happening on a regular basis, where students have missed 8 to 10 days of school just this year alone, is pretty shocking. How does the occupation limit the provision of other UNRWA services, such as health services, relief and social services, infrastructure? I've seen headlines again about just the whole, it seems like a minor thing, but can you imagine the whole garbage pickup? The streets are just, overwhelmed with trash and stench and vermin, what comes with that, next to this first world country. Maybe you can tell us about how these incursions affect UNRWA's ability to deliver basic life-saving services.
Sure. We have at the moment nearly 4,000 staff in UNRWA in the West Bank. So it's a very, the bulk of our resources go to staffing, and those staff are frontline implementers of the work. So it's not, that we're handing out grants or money to other partners who are doing this. It's really UNRWA staff who are there. So it's 1,500 teachers on any given day. We have health centers that are seeing patients. I mean, our average for our doctors is they're meeting with patients for 3 to 3.5 minutes each. Wow. Crazy, right? And now with some of the closures, more patients are coming on Saturday trying to, catch up to the appointments. So you've got doctors, and I've met some just yesterday in Dehesha camp, which is near Bethlehem. And, they're flat out. They're working flat out. Imagine any doctor, I don't know, that your kids, you say, your kid's pediatrician, if they had to see, 120 patients a day. I mean, it's absolutely, you could never imagine that, right? And so we're providing that frontline medical support, health provision, 43 clinics in the West Bank, 96 schools. We also have a number of training, 2 adult training centers, and then also centers that focus on vocational training, trying to get people to, into the job market. The great irony there is that many of those skills in the trades, plumbing, electrical work, bricklaying, they're one of the goals for many of them is to get a work permit to go into Israel, to cross the border, across the barrier into Israel, where the salaries are a good bit higher. So there really is this unique symbiotic relationship between these two populations, right? I mean, Israel as would probably fall, basically collapse if it didn't have all of these services that are provided by Palestinians, particularly in the laboring trades and other functions like that. And another surreal element, and this is a world full of surreality, is that those Palestinians are building the settlements that the settlers are then occupying, because they're the construction laborers. So it has a lot of these kind of crazy things. But on our own services, so schooling, as I say, has been impacted. We're trying now to think of new ways of delivering and catching up with weekend classes. Maybe we have a kind of a break coming up soon, maybe having the kids come in again. This is a cost. You've got to bring teachers in who would normally be on vacation. They've got to come in again. They might have to come in on a weekend. They might have to come in over the winter break to catch up on those classes. We have, a limited digital presence.
Yep.
So it's not like every kid can go home and get on their iPad, right? Which many of us did in different parts of the world that were more blessed. So that's an issue with internet connections, having the right kinds of software and hardware to accommodate digital learning. So it's not such an easy thing in this context to just say, oh, fine, people can go, students can go home. So there's a catching up on that. And the health clinics, as I say, we're trying to catch up and make certain that the services are provided. Yeah. We had good successes around COVID with vaccinations, where the government, the PA, actually came to us and wanted to work with us, the Ministry of Health, to help us with vaccination campaigns. We also, there were 1 or 2 polio cases, as I understand, in Jerusalem. And so there was a big push to make sure that everybody had their polio vaccine. Yeah. We did that. We worked with the government on that to also be, because we're so intimately connected with the community, right? Yes. I mean, many of our staff are refugees, some 90% of our staff. Many of them are from and grew up in refugee camps. Yeah. And we have so many success stories in our team. So somebody who's now leading one of the teams, I grew up in that camp.
Wow.
And so there's so much a part of the fabric of the society.
Yes.
And
that's not unlike any other UN agency, right? Where the majority.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You might have, in every country office that I've been in, you have national staff who work for the UN, all for the sort of common good. But here, there's the unique piece that they have a really fundamental vested interest in the agenda, the work, and the mandate of the organization, because they're impacted.
Yes,
right? They're impacted. They said, I remember that. I saw my grandfather had photographs of our house in Jaffa. Yeah. Here's a picture of our farm south of Hebron, and we haven't been there in 80 years, but or 70 plus years. But one day I hope to go back. Yeah. So there's that intimate, very genuine connection that the colleagues have to this issue, and every piece of their identity has been slowly eroded. Yeah. That's the kind of sinister nature of an occupation. It's kind of every little piece. So I have some colleagues who are very senior, in their 50s, maybe experts in education and health and social services, that have to go through this demeaning exercise daily of going through a checkpoint and showing an ID to an 18-year-old soldier who, with
and this is, we're talking about
simple faced, it's kind of give me your ID, and it's like so some of our colleagues are spending 2-3 hours a day each way to get to the office. And
then just for our listeners, so they understand, especially those who haven't been to the West Bank and East Jerusalem, we're talking within the West Bank. We're talking to get from one town to another town within the West Bank. There are these checkpoints, and I think that's something that American audience doesn't always understand. They see there's 2 plots of land.
No, not at all.
And it's not at all like that. It sounds
no, it's very, very restricted. And you've got this zigzagging of roads and checkpoints and barriers. So I ask colleagues, I have a meeting in this location, how long will it take to get there, or how far is it?
Yeah.
And I think in the US we think about like the time it takes to get there. Right. Nobody says, it's 85 miles to this town, right? You say, it'll take you an hour and a half or something, right?
Right. On a good day, on a bad day, it could take you longer. I experienced that myself. Yeah,
right.
The capriciousness too, that you just don't know what you're going to encounter at the checkpoint.
Right. And I tell the colleagues that I don't want to know the kilometers between the locations. I want to know the time. Yeah. On average, does it take an hour or is it 2 hours? And forget about the fact that it's only 17 kilometers. Because it's such a small area. All of this we should be zipping all around. Right. But we have to, even things like the movement of our own staff. Yeah. We have buses. We have to bus them, because not everybody can drive or can move without the right kind of permit. So we need a driver that has a permit that allows that driver to take a bus into Jerusalem to our office.
Yeah.
So the other day I was with a senior staff member, and we were outside Jerusalem. He was unable to drive his own car in. I'm one of the UNRWA cars. So my special assistant, who was obviously, younger,
Yeah.
but an international, said, "Oh, well, I'll make sure I'll drive him in." And again, it's these kinds of things that are just unnecessary, and they're demeaning on such a fundamental level.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let me just take a moment to tell you we have a number of listeners and viewers right now, and
Great.
we've got folks from Virginia, nearby to DC where we are. We have folks from Gaza listening, from
great.
Europe, and just a lot of notes of thanks already, Adam, for you sharing your experiences, and especially in light of your vast international experience, what that difference is, working on the ground in the West Bank, in the occupied West Bank and Gaza. We value this so much. If I may, let me ask you just a kind of counterfactual. If UNRWA didn't exist in the West Bank, what would life be like? What would you imagine if UNRWA wasn't there to provide these services you've been describing all along in terms of health and education and social services and infrastructure improvements?
Yeah. No, it's a fair question. And donor fatigue, or fatigue generally around conflict, is a genuine global phenomenon, right? Let's look at the current Russian-Ukraine war. When some of the analysts started to say, well, this is going to be protracted, this might drag on for a while, everyone's like, oh, really? Because the thought was, oh, it's in Europe, it'll probably be solved with some quick conversation, and people are already tiring of this.
Right.
And although Europe opened its doors to this new refugee population, right, that will also, people will grow tired of that, right? When, and we don't know exactly when, but it's everybody open. Oh, please come to Italy, come to Greece, come to Germany, come. You're our brothers, and we're fighting this together with you. If it's a decade from now, people have a very different opinion, right? So we're 70 plus years on the ground. Donor fatigue and concerns over this conflict are genuine. On the question of what happens in the absence of UNRWA, and another related question, I got this yesterday from a delegation from the United Kingdom, because we have many delegations that come to visit, was, aren't you part of the problem? Isn't UNRWA part of the problem? If you just went away,
right,
the PA, Palestinian authorities, government would just have to, pick up and do all the work. The Israelis would have to say, you know what? Yeah, you're right. We're going to go ahead and manage this population just as we do anybody else, right? Well, good luck on that. From capacity and also politics, but really the fundamental mandate of UNRWA was that it was created because there was a population of people that were driven out. So our mandate is specific to Palestinian refugees. It is not, other populations. We're regional in the sense that we have offices in Lebanon and Syria, Gaza, West Bank, and Jordan, focusing entirely on this population until there is a solution to the conflict.
Right.
So if we were to leave tomorrow, this would mean that the conflict has been solved. That's the only time that we would go. That's how the mandate reads.
Right.
In practical terms, we are providing services to something like a third of the population in the West Bank.
Yeah.
And who fills that void? And again, really think about the, in this quasi-governmental kind of model, that, if the state government just closed in I don't know, New York, my state, what happens with a lot of those services?
Yep.
Who manages the public school system? I don't know, whatever. Or as you say, something like sanitation.
Yep.
So we have sanitation laborers, and I met a number of them yesterday, with rickety old metal carts going through these winding, narrow, not even streets, because this was a refugee camp that started out as tents. There are photographs on the wall from 48 where it's really like tented refugee camps that you think about when you think of refugee camps.
Right.
And I've worked in those places, and where it's tented and it's in the desert and sandy and dusty, and you think, okay, it really looks temporary. But now we've got generations and generations, and some of the buildings there are now 6 stories high because there's no room to grow out. They're not permitted to grow beyond the space. So you've got a rickety old concrete structure that was meant to be kind of semi-temporary, and then a house on top because somebody got married and had another child and another, because of course the populations have grown over these decades. It's 4 generations.
Yep.
So sanitation, something so simple like that, if we're not in UNRWA removing that trash, it doesn't get picked up.
Yeah.
There's no other mechanism for it.
Yep.
If our teacher can't get to school because of some road checkpoint,
yep,
that means that class doesn't have a teacher.
yep,
And if it's and they're the front line delivery of services to the population. The doctor is sitting there with the patient, prescribing medicine, referrals to psychosocial support, referrals to physiotherapy, referrals to whatever might be necessary, surgery or other things, right? Yeah. So it's that frontline nature and our engagement with the population every single day that makes sort of the absence of UNRWA would leave a huge void in this spot. And then what happens? All right, so the bigger political question, right?
Yeah.
So now let's say UNRWA closes tomorrow, and you've got several million refugees without services in the region. Where do they go? Right? They all try to escape to Europe, and then you've got the whole resistance in Europe to the migration crisis and the refugee crisis and all the rest of it. Different than the treatment for the Ukrainians, by the way, right?
Yeah.
And then, or in the U.S., it's like, well, wait a second, do we want to sort of, do we say that? Do we say, okay, we're going to take all, near 5 million people, and okay, all of them can come to upstate New York. We'll open our arms for this Palestinian population, right? It's not really practical.
Right.
And so that's why the role that we serve is so fundamental to the human dignity of this population and to the delivery of those services. That absent UNRWA, that they simply wouldn't get done. Right. And and we have so many great success stories, and it makes it seem like everything is kind of tragic. But we have wonderful students who are excelling. One student was just selected to go to a NASA program. There were some Palestinian kids that they won some award in Dubai on artificial intelligence. Yep. You have a rich cultural part of the world here in terms of cuisine and history and language and costumes. I saw a great poster of different traditional attire. You have music. You have so many things here that are rich, and this educated population. I have brilliant staff members who are caught up in this craziness of the occupation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get the same question about is UNRWA doing more harm than good by existing? And I say, I believe in planned obsolescence. When there is a just and durable peace that is actually working for the parties, by the parties involved, and really at the service of those who are being affected negatively now, by all means, UNRWA can no longer, it doesn't need to exist. But until there's that just and durable solution, it is absolutely necessary. And as you say, essentially, UNRWA is a quasi. It's acting as a Ministry of Health, as a Ministry of Education in Gaza and parts of the West Bank, in the camps in Lebanon, in the camps in Jordan, etc. So we can't imagine.
And it's a mix of all of these other kind of mandates that when you think about maybe children and education, you think of UNICEF, refugees, you think of UNHCR and refugees, you think of WHO for health. UNESCO in education, we partner with those. We have these relationships with those organizations, and but it's all of it together. Yes. And then on top of that is the kind of humanitarian response, because we have a number of individuals who are below the poverty line. I mean, our poverty line defined as $1.70 a day. We have a population of people who are really at the bottom of the sort of economic rung. We also, we serve them. We serve them with cash assistance, food assistance. We have a Bedouin community that are being also pushed out of the West Bank, and they've been here, literally forever. As long as people have walked the earth, kind of thing. And they're sort of, well, now what? So you have these images of the Bedouin farmer, holding a kind of, wooden staff and 10 goats in front of him, and is okay. Now where do I go?
Yeah.
What? And those are the same Bedouin farmers who taught many of the Israelis and the settlers how to farm in this arid climate.
Wow.
Right? Because all those people are coming from other places, right? So you're coming from, I don't know, you're from Europe, and you suddenly find yourself in the Jordan Valley. Who knows how to farm that?
Right.
And so here, and they've even said that, kind of come out and said that, the Bedouins, saying, well, we supported you, like we're part of this land, So.
Yeah. Well, and so you mentioned the students and some of the amazing students that come out of UNRWA education, and we certainly seen that in the U.S. We have alum of UNRWA. UNRWA schools who we always talk about Loa Basuni, who put the helicopter that's flown on Mars recently. We have friends of ours in the UNRWA alumni community who are helping to cure cancer at Memorial Sloan Kettering, who are involved in AI. And they're also, I like to say, they're also the lawyers, doctors, architects, policemen, teachers, in our communities all over the U.S. And so maybe you can, in the interest of showing the light, not just the darkness, tell us what other UNRWA services give you hope and make you feel like the future for these refugees who have been through so much, they and their families, for the last 70 some odd years. Where do you see the hope, and how is UNRWA part of that?
Okay. Well, I think, if you look up, say in a dictionary, I don't know, does anybody have dictionaries anymore? Let's say, okay, you look up, the term resilience. You look up the term resilience, and it ought to just say, Palestinian next to it.
Yeah.
Because this is a population that really embodies resilience. I don't know how they do it. I mean, I'm really in awe. I'm extremely respectful of Palestine refugees, and in all these different locations. I happen to be in the West Bank, but look at the conditions in Lebanon and Syria. So, refugee in Syria, and on top of that, a decade-long war. So it's all these sort of things that are compounded. And Gaza, a restricted kind of prison environment. Can't get in, can't get out. You've got the beautiful Mediterranean there, but you can't even really go fishing. Restrictions on water usage and access and materials and electricity and all the rest of it. So I don't know how really they keep their sanity in this. I'm here just 6 weeks, and I get frustrated. I think this is, what's going to happen now at this checkpoint? What is he going to say to someone in my car who they don't like, or looks to be Palestinian, or looks to be from wherever they think the person might be? So there is all of that, which just kind of permeates life here. And Jerusalem also as a city is a very tense place. What gives me hope is these, you're saying, like, these brilliant students and colleagues who are achieving, and they're very proud of what they do. So when I was recently talking with even the sanitation laborers in this camp yesterday, and the foreman saying, oh, well, this is I know this room looks a bit messy, but this is because this is our spare parts area, and we're saving the wheels that we can from each of the carts, so that we can, we want to make sure we have, X number of carts working every day. I know it's a bit of a mess. Sorry, Mr. Director. And they're all very kind of, deferential and everything, but showing me, where they're working, and proud that they now have an enclosed area, because they used to stand out in the cold in the winter, after cleaning trash. And it's really very manual and labor intensive, because the camps are so crowded, and sometimes the streets are not really passable by any kind of vehicle. So it really is manual. It's a guy with a cart collecting trash, bringing it to a collection point. We're then loading it up, taking it to one of 2 landfills in the entire West Bank. Yes. There used to be a third one. This was closed by the Israelis to be used for who knows what. So it makes it even tougher and more expensive for us to move the trash to a landfill, which of course is not a well-run landfill. Everything is kind of half baked. It's sort of like, well, we have these kind of resources. We're trying to do our best, but ideally we would have X, Y, and Z, but we don't.
Right.
But yeah, some of the doctors and nurses, I mean, they're highly educated. They would be earning high salaries and be very respected in other environments, but they're staying here and working in this kind of context because of the love for the land and the love for the history of the place. That I find really motivating. They're very genuine.
Yep.
They also, I was joking with a colleague that every story here is a long story, and UNRWA's been around for a while. So when I ask a question about something like, oh, okay, do you have some time? Let me explain it. Go get a cup of coffee, and this might take a while, because when you scratch beneath the surface, and UNRWA has been involved in almost every issue that's transpired in this in the West Bank, good and bad, and the good moments, and where there might have been greater connection and conversation and communication with the Israeli authorities, times where there was less of that. I'm trying now as a newcomer to have that open door as much as I can with the Israelis, so that we can deliver our services and make some of those positive stories known.
Yes.
That it's not all, because again, the narrative is so imbalanced, and a terrorist shot at a checkpoint kind of thing, and you never really. It's like, yeah, but let's talk about some of the things that we do that are positive. The population that we have in the UN as United Nations employees is the following, and they are upholding the highest levels of integrity and neutrality, which is very tough in an environment like this.
Extremely tough.
Very tough, yeah. And in this constant kind of violence. So we're always trying to talk of those interesting successes that are, they're genuine. Yeah, they're not. We don't have to make them up. They come to us every day. And I'm going. I think it's tomorrow that I'm going, or in the next couple of days, I'm going to meet another one of our great successful students and recognize that student, and
Yeah. I had the chance last summer to be in the West Bank and see so many of these, UNRWA employees who are so proud of their work at every level, and frankly, increasingly seeing women in management positions. Hanadia, shout out to you, director of the northern part of the West Bank, and so just a wonderful group of individuals. And let's just end on hopefully another hopeful note, which is, maybe you can tell us, and thank you so much for all of your comments and your personal reflections, having only been in the position for 6 weeks, but maybe how can we in the US, whether we're in government or civilians, how can we better support refugees, Palestine refugees, and UNRWA's work? Okay.
I think it's maybe most important to be informed, to read as much as you can about this conflict. Don't just rely on the sound bites that might appear very occasionally in a newspaper. Go to the UNRWA website, read what's happening, see the kinds of stories, look at the statements of the Commissioner General at the highest political level. What does this mandate mean? How does it impact on a significant population of people that through no fault of their own have been thrown into this many decade-long political story, and in the U.S. you got to dig a bit more than maybe other places, right? It is tougher, and I've always been frustrated, as a UN person, but outside, but watching this conflict, working in different areas, that the minute you sort of talk about Palestinian rights or opportunities for education, or you say, oh, wait a sec, are you're being an anti-Semite, and that is a really unfortunate, kind of washing of the reality. Look at this issue as a human rights and dignity problem. It's a protection crisis. Yeah. Every child needs education, regardless of their name or their faith, or and that's what we're doing. Every child should be vaccinated against polio or whatever we had done, that where we're supporting communities. So
one of your colleagues had once said, and I always think about this, there are no A-level and B-level people. Every child, no matter, like you said, what their ethnicity, their background, deserve these basic human rights and services.
Sure. And you want to, when I saw all those kids, and I was at another camp a couple of days ago, and you meet kids, that for me is always the most powerful thing, is to see the children there. You want to scoop them all up and hug the entire class and take them out of this pain that they have, and try to understand all of that stuff. 100%. So read, understand, and question, and that's fine. And then people can come back to me and other parts of UNRWA and ask these questions. I think it's healthy for us because we tend to be this very large UN organization that in some ways can be a bit insular because we're so caught up in the day-to-day delivery. And so questions from outside and efforts to better understand the challenges are absolutely welcome, certainly from my office. And then there's the being advocates and saying that exactly this, no A and B child, but you've got to have, human rights are human rights. That's the whole fundamental basis of the United Nations. It's what I did my original research on in graduate school, my PhD. So for me, this is not to be debated. And it doesn't go away with time. This idea that, it's been so long, just get over it. It's like looking at the situation of slavery in the history of the U.S. and say, oh, just get over it. It happened a long time ago. No, it's not. Why? What do you mean get over it? This is what happened. And we need to be very clear on how we communicate that to our students and our next generations and all the rest of it. Yes. And so there's this advocacy and being, supporters and proponents and get involved. And then, because I'm a director and I can't not say this, Mara, is the financial contributions, right? So as a UN agency, and I've been all these different agencies, and interestingly enough, I was in Saudi Arabia before here as the UNDP resident representative, and that was one of those interesting work environments because we had money. Sometimes the government couldn't always decide how to spend it, but it was the first time I went into an office where there was actually like money in the coffers. And I thought, this is great, But here we're always struggling. We've gone through a number of austerity measures that have really, I think, and I'm a newcomer, of course, but impacted on the kind of morale and when things are, even little things are, the compounds and facilities are worn out. We have limited money for infrastructure. We have over 200 installations in the West Bank, and our maintenance budget, the beginning of this year, was $12,000.
Yes.
12,000 for 200 installations. I think I spent more renovating my bathroom in upstate New York, right? So, when you look at that and you think about water and sanitation, you think about protection concerns of having bathrooms that are safe and clean for girls, plumbing that's working, safe rooms, lighting, signage even on our building, gates that close because there's going to be a military incursion. You want your gate to close firmly. Doorways between hallways if we have to move kids around for safety concerns. Medical facilities that don't have a functioning elevator. We have an elevator, but we didn't have maintenance budgets. So we have that people are literally carrying the disabled up a flight of stairs to get medical treatment. These demeaning things that you don't want to see. You don't want to see it in Virginia or wherever you're seated at the moment, Mara, right? Is that those little things. Right. And so every dollar counts. We're extremely efficient in the way we deliver our services as compared to a lot of other organizations, even though people love to talk about UNRWA's big and so many staff. Nobody else does what we do. Yes. And there's a cost attached to that. Yes. And the military presence now and the increase in violence is only increasing those needs, right? Scrambling to try to find, okay, how do we get 1,000 tablets delivered to a community where we can have then some kind of online learning, right? Or how do we negotiate humanitarian access into a camp with the Israelis for the purposes of delivering medicine, or getting a nurse into that clinic because we've got a queue of people outside, some of whom have been injured because of the military incursion, right? So we need to respond to that population. So I think there's always the financial piece, always welcome to recipients of any contribution that people wish to make. But also I think even on the substantive side, the technical inputs and research on the topic and publishing things, and maybe through your good offices, Mara, maybe there's opportunities to also advocate through research and other things. I'm an academic at heart, so I always like to sort of think, what can we put on paper, and how can we get other intellectuals and academics involved in what it is we're doing, what it means in real terms.
And searching for the truth and understanding what's really going on beyond the headlines. This has been so informative, and I just want to just want to, I was actually looking at the messages of two viewers that I think were really profound. I mean, one is Rania Kawasame, who is an UNRWA alum herself out of Seattle. And she said, she summed up what you said, which is read, understand, question, and advocate. We couldn't agree more. So thank you, Rania. And then on top of that, donate, of course, as you said, Adam. And I will say that we are here today as UNRWA USA because of the compassion and generosity of so many tens of thousands of Americans who do look past the headlines and want to understand a little bit more. And then once they know, they can't help but contribute, because we are talking about human rights, the rights of every young person, every child, every mother, every father, grandfather, grandma. And then also a great note from Florence Moore: as a progressive Jewish American, the hopeful sign is that the number of American Jews who recognize the difference between anti-Semitism and criticism of Israel is growing. So thank you for educating. I couldn't agree more. It is a disservice to the Jewish people to say what you should or should not believe as a Jewish person. And in fact, some would say that's anti-Semitic in itself. So let the Jewish people speak for what they believe on this issue. Let us not equate criticism of the occupation as criticism as anti-Semitism. We support you wholeheartedly. And we thank our lovely audience for listening today. And Adam, thank you for sharing so much of this important work and your expertise with us, your kind of hot off the press observations being so so new to the area, but with so much expertise on these issues globally. On behalf of our entire UNRWA USA team, we appreciate the time you took to tell us about current conditions on the ground in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. And on this note, I would like to remind all those watching to keep your eye on Palestine and continue showing your solidarity as you have with Palestine refugees by supporting organizations like UNRWA USA.
And come and visit.
Shoot, what, Adam?
Come and visit.
And come and visit, and yes, and come with us if you'd like. We'd love to take some interested parties with us as well. And I'm so happy also to say that last year UNRWA USA was the #1 institutional supporter of UNRWA, bringing in over $5 million to support these important programs you've described, and that's because of the generosity of Americans, all who are listening today. Tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time via Instagram Live, we are so excited to continue talking about a number of these issues because we are hosting Mo Amer. I don't know, Adam, if you've seen the show Mo on Netflix, but Mo is a Palestinian-American actor, filmmaker, and comedian, and he just put out his new show on Netflix, which many of us have seen all the episodes of, and this really showcases the life of a Palestinian refugee in the U.S. waiting for his path to U.S. citizenship. Join us tomorrow via Instagram handle @UNRWA USA for a conversation with Mo that my colleague Diala Ghanem will be hosting on refugees, solidarity, and on comedy. Yes, there is comedy when we talk about issues like that.
You need a sense of humor in the United Nations for sure. So and that I think is one thing I've learned after all of these years, right? You got to find some way to keep your sanity, sure, and find the humor in things. Yeah.
Great. So follow us on social media at UNRWA USA, UNRWA USA. Donate, as Adam said, as we've been saying, become a monthly donor and spread the word about our work with your loved ones. We thank all of you. We thank you, Adam, and we hope you have a great week ahead.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all the listeners out there and for the commitment of UNRWA USA. We're so appreciative. Thank you so much.
Thanks.